what we do with our time or with our money right now, so largely decided by some of the finest minds that are working on social media algorithms, right?
You know, social media is not great for young people. And even if it's not harmful, we're missing out on the good things that come from connecting with other people.
Question, do companies and corporates really care for employee well-being and happiness? Welcome to another episode of Deep Talks. Today we have someone with us who's made a remarkable impact in the field of positive psychology and mental health. She's an author, she's an editor, she's written a number of articles that have been published by various media houses around the world. Let's welcome Dr. Louise. Dr. Louise, welcome to Deep Talks.
Thank you so much.
It's great to have you.
I'm glad to be here.
You know, what is also more remarkable and something that's very special is that you're also a jury member at the Employee Happiness Awards, the awards that we run for the HR and the employee happiness industry.
I am. And I think I've been one of the first.
You've been one of the first. Yes. You have been the first.
I was the first.
Yes.
Of course I'm the first.
You were, yes. and you know, your help has been really amazing in identifying and celebrating companies that have truly done something for their employees.
Thank you.
So thank you so much for that.
My pleasure.
Right. Let's take it from the beginning, right? So positive psychology. What drew you into this vertical? And was it something that triggered once, you know, and you're like, yeah, this is where I want to make my career?
No, I thought it'd be an easy A in my graduate studies. That's it.
Right.
So I am a psychologist. When I signed up to do my doctorate, obviously you have courses in statistics, research methods, all these really dry and not very interesting things. And there was one course in positive psychology, and I thought, okay, this is a chance to get my GPA up. So I took it quite by accident, and really it transformed my whole worldview. So up until then, I'd been working in mental health, so dealing with depression, anxiety, major mental health issues, so people with schizophrenia, bipolar, etc. And I thought psychology was going to be more uplifting than that, but I realized mainstream psychology is really about reducing misery, which is great if you're miserable or if you have, less than ideal states of mental health. But positive psychology is really the other half of human experience. So it's looking at how do we uplift people? How do we inspire people? How do we apply the same scientific method to what makes life worth living? So in short, it's how do we create meaningful lives for people?
Right. So am I right in saying that it's a shift in the focus from treating illness to the science of happiness or cultivating happiness?
Yeah. So in mainstream media, we use the word happiness, but really in positive psychology, we don't use that word. There's no definition. So in fact, we use subjective well-being, life satisfaction, or the experience of positive emotions. And in short, yes, shorthand is the science of happiness, but essentially it's looking at how do we use the same psychological science, if you will, towards the other half of human experience.
Right. So would it be right to say that happiness, obviously, you need to work on your habits, and over a period of time that leads to positivity, happiness, etc.?
Yeah. So, and this is where there's confusion, and this is where the word happiness becomes problematic. So we can look at happiness, if you will, as both an input and an outcome. So in positive psychology, we have what's called positive psychology interventions. So these are all the different measures, the different interventions and strategies, if you will, that we know empirically lead to greater happiness, subjective well-being, life satisfaction, whatnot. And these are interventions that we test over time. So we've tested them 1, 3, 6, and 12 months out. So we know that they work, they're reliable, and they're as effective as antidepressant medication, for example, or cognitive behavioral therapy. So these are activities and interventions that people do over time or repeatedly to improve their outcome, which would be happiness. So if we think of happiness a little bit like health, you don't go to the gym once and go, whew, okay, I'm done. It's a practice. You have to keep it up. You have to keep going. And eventually you hit, a certain plateau, and then you need to mix it up and do something different. So in short, it's about how do you create a life that builds on all of these habits and that is sustained over time so that you can continue to reap the benefits of greater well-being.
So you're saying that people do have complete control on their happiness and it can be cultivated.
Yes, but they do not have complete control over it.
Right.
So we know, again, a lot of good research tells us that happiness or positivity, levels of positive emotion are in part driven by genetics. So you are a little bit doomed by your parents, whatever baggage they came with. Yeah. We also know that there's a lot of science behind the generational transmission of trauma. So if you're growing up in a war zone, if that is generational, you will inherit some of that baggage as well. We also know that circumstances play a role. They're not as big as we would think they are. So if you are going through a divorce, you're going through bankruptcy, these are absolutely going to crash your happiness levels. But over time, if we look over our lifetime, the biggest contributor to happiness is what we do. So it is the habits. It's how we think. It's how we relate to people. It's the activities that we do intentionally every single day. Right. So yes, we have control, but there are other influences that are kind of working against us often.
Right. And how much does genes matter?
Well, genetics is actually bigger than our own intentional control.
Do we have a percentage?
It's about 40%.
40% of happiness huge. Is your genes.
Yeah. So you're kind of like stuck. 10% is circumstances, and then the rest is what we do. Now, this is across major populations. So for every individual, it might be slightly lower for you or slightly higher, depending on the genetic baggage you come from. But it is to say that, some people have to work harder than others because of kind of the state they're coming into the world with.
Right. So this is more a personal mental health check or happiness, how you define your personal happiness, right? But is there a different definition for well-being at work?
Or in a totally different. Totally different. So there's our personal happiness, again, the choices that you make, the things that you do, the relationships that you have, the decisions that you don't make as well. All of these go into, contributing to our state of happiness. In the workplace, now this is different because this depends very much on the workplace.
Yeah.
So I think of workplaces a lot like families. If you have a really great, well-adjusted kid and you put him in a family with parents that are dysfunctional and, kind of scrappy brothers and sisters, eventually over time, that rubs off on this well-adjusted child.
Yeah.
Or the opposite can happen. We can uplift children when they're in the right environments. So workplaces very much is, we think of that social contract. There is what the organization does, there's what the individual brings, and then there's that kind of medium in between where who knows what's going to come out in the wash. So workplace well-being is different because it depends on so many other factors, and you are probably a little bit more at the mercy of circumstances and others than you would be in your own personal life, where you make the decisions, you're responsible for what happens and what you choose.
So in a way, they're always playing sort of catch-22, right? I mean, if you're happy at work, but not happy in your personal life, it can still affect the other side.
So there's really interesting research that came out last year, and I'm happy to share it with listeners, but examining that exact question. So what comes first? So is it if you're happy in life, you bring it to work, or does a good workplace translate into a happy life? And it turns out it's happier people are happier at work.
Right.
Whereas if you're unhappy in life and work is good, it doesn't necessarily translate to home. So there is merit in helping individuals improve their levels of happiness because they do bring that to work. Now, there's a certain point at which that stops, materializing in the sense that, you've heard the expression, you can't out yoga a bad manager, right? So you might be very happy, optimistic, resilient, you're, very persistent, you're very social, you're great to be around, you're also good at what you do. But again, the context is going to influence you in such a way that might erode over time.
Right.
So again, it's always looking at that dynamic between the two, but definitely pre-existing happiness impacts work.
Right. So both of them have to work together for an overall happiness and well-being, right? But here's the important question. Do companies and corporates really care for employee well-being and happiness, or is it just done to show the world that, we're doing probably a sports day or a pizza party
yoga,
or something of that sort? Do you think stress balls or a good coffee barista? But do you think corporates really care for the happiness of employees?
I think many corporates do. And I think there are still some that I don't want to say they don't care. I think maybe they're just not quite caught up on the science of what improving happiness levels could translate to. Mm-hmm. So we know the research is quite robust in this, that happier employees in a company, that company will be more productive, will perform higher on the S&P 500. That just came out. Actually, it was Glassdoor research that showed that. So, higher stock, higher performance, higher profit. There are benefits to organizations of ensuring that their people are happy. I don't think all organizations get that, or all organizations are at the developmental stage to be able to do something to make that happen. So sometimes that comes over time where people kind of realize something's still not working, right? Yeah. We've got everything in place and still we're not as profitable as we could be. We've hit that ceiling. What else could we do? So that's one place that employee well-being may be the solution. But to answer your question, there are many organizations who are really knocking it out of the park and doing really great things, and they are reaping the benefits of that.
So what's the percentage like? How many percentage of companies you think are really working for employee happiness in a very genuine way?
Now you're really asking. You're really putting me on the spot. I will say there are probably more not doing it than are.
Okay. Would you give a percentage?
No, I don't know. But again, those that are doing, they're learning as they go and they're understanding what is working and what's not. And then others are at the very beginning stage doing pizza pop parties and the yoga and the endless webinars that they're forcing people to watch, thinking something's going to come out of that.
Right.
So I think what is very promising is that we are seeing this developmental maturity, if you will, in organizations that are now starting to ask more difficult questions. So just a couple of weeks ago, I was talking to a CEO and who said, Lego, is there a return on that? And I was like, tell me more. And I think in my head, I already know the answer to this, but but I was really glad at the question he was asking, because in short, he's saying, look, we're spending all kinds of money on all sorts of activities. What is the actual outcome of that?
Right.
And my answer was probably not much. So if your HR team is doing endless activities and what seems like games and things, it's not that nothing's going to work, but you will need to ask, what's the return on this? What is the expected outcome? Why are we doing this? In fact, how is this going to impact our culture and individual people, rather than, oh, yay, something on the well-being menu. Sure, let's just do it. And we're spending money in every direction. And we don't know why. We don't know why, and it doesn't really do anything.
But are employees honest? For example, if you, when you do a survey, a lot of anonymous surveys happen within the organization. But would employees come out and really say, well, I'm not happy? Or would they be worried that, the management will know that this person's not happy, and then that could backfire?
Yeah. So sometimes it does. So some organizations, they say it's anonymous, but it's really not. Others, it is anonymous. So even in some of my past organizations, we've been asked all these questions and we're all like, let's see what came back. It's like it never happened. We never talked about it again. And then you hear through the grapevine, oh my God, the results were terrible. And so we're just killing it. Well, that's not helpful. And when you do that, unfortunately, you start to silence people because they think, this goes nowhere. Why would I even answer? And then in other organizations, people are very honest and people will tell you, no, I'm not happy. And yes, I am looking for another job. And it's because of this, this, and this. And so what organizations do with that now is a different question. Right. But I would say that most organizations don't always ask the right questions.
Right.
It's, are you happy with the insurance package? Who cares? Are you happy with your salary? Well, everybody gives a salary, right? So let's start asking more questions around factors that really do make a difference around well-being. So do you trust your manager? Would you turn to your manager? Do you like the people you work with? Do you feel you are heard? Do you feel you are seen? Do you feel that you matter in this organization?
Yeah.
Right. And these are really the building blocks when we talk about employee well-being. That's really what it comes down to. Do you feel good here?
Right.
I mean, it's a very simple way of saying it, but it comes down to, how do people, again, feel they are seen, they are heard, and feel they are mattered over?
Right. And how big, obviously, we all know we're all here working, doing jobs for money. It's a commercial gain. So where does that stand in terms of keeping the workforce happy? I'm sure it's, if you have to give it in a list of 1 to 5, where would that rank?
Sure, you want to be competitive and it needs to be, equal to other players in the market. Absolutely. Yeah. You want to be paid fairly. You want to be paid on time. You want to be paid what you are worth. Once that is in place, though, money doesn't really do much after that. So companies who just kind of keep giving more raises, I mean, I wouldn't say no to that, but does it fix your manager's your relationship with your manager? Not really. Does it make you like your peers more? Not really. Does it mean you are growing or you're going to move into that next position? Not necessarily. So it fixes some things, but it doesn't fix the meat and potatoes, if you will, of the equation.
Right. And we see there are a number of new strategies adopted by different corporates around the world. Yeah. One of them is the 4-day week, work week, right? And I think people are torn in two different sides right now. Some people are wanting the workforce to do 6 days a week. Some are saying 4 days is really productive. What's your take on that?
So again, I always come back to what does the research have to say? So a lot of these studies, I think some of the first countries, it was like, of course, the Scandinavian countries rose 10 miles ahead of everybody, but a few of those studies were started there. I know the UK has recently done a couple of basically experiments to see what's the impact on productivity, what's also the impact on well-being. And what we see is exactly what you think, is that people are just as productive in a shorter amount of time. Because if you think about any given day, a lot of it is spent drinking coffee, chatting, and that's okay. I mean, there's value in that. We're building social capital, taking a little break, it's fine. But if you compress that into less time, you will get the same work done. And in fact, you might even get it done to a higher degree of quality because now you're really focusing. You want to get out on time because you're off on Friday, right? So productivity tends to stay the same with shorter hours. Well-being tends to increase because now people have time to, hang out with their kids, go to the gym, cook, shop. Oh my gosh, do laundry, do all the things that they know will make them happier or at least balance out their life a little bit more. So companies that are forcing people back, I don't think that's necessarily out of concern for well-being. On the other hand, I think there is sometimes value to that because precisely there are certain types of work where you do think better with other people. You are more creative with other people. You do need that face-to-face bouncing ideas back and forth. You can't do that on your own. So I think there is value in coming back to work, but every day of the week, I don't see the justification for that. Right. So some organizations have been actually since COVID, but basically to justify why people should come back to work. On the day they come back, it's fully dedicated. It's basically a planned day. Right. Think of it like school. You've got this at 9, this at 10, this at 12. And there's a reason to come back. So it's group work, it's ideation, it's creative work in a group, it's decision-making, it's conversations. There's a reason to go back. It's not going back to sit on your laptop to be on another Zoom call with somebody in a different office. Yeah.
So a hybrid model, basically. A
hybrid model tends to be really good.
And this is research-based, like the hybrid model.
Yeah.
Right.
So if people, on the flip side, people who work from home all the time exclusively, they tend to have a little bit lower well-being. It's hard to be motivated on your own. Eventually, you're like, oh my gosh, staring out the window, watching the cars go by. It's really difficult. But also it's really lonely as well.
Yeah.
and you're not getting that social contact. So a balance of both tends to be the best.
That model works, right? I recently heard Elon Musk talk about people coming back to work. And he wants his workforce to be in office all the time. And he says it's not fair on people who have to, who are carpenters, for example, who have to be at work all the time. They're not the laptop class, right? The laptop class has an advantage of working from home, but not everyone does. So it's not fair on everybody as an ecosystem. What are your thoughts?
Well, for sure, if you're a carpenter, you need to be on site. If you're on a laptop, you don't. But it's kind of a wimpy excuse to call people back in, right? So
say an engineer because he's running a SpaceX or a Tesla. So most of the engineers have to be at work working, right? So his idea is that, or his thought process is that everybody should have the fair playing field and everybody should be working from office.
Okay. So I think that's a bit of a lever, right? To like justify why everybody should come back. But the person in the office who is just filling in invoices might feel very differently.
Right.
Right. So I think it's just, organizations are kind of testing, experimenting to see what works. And also employees are deciding, is this how I want to work? And many are also voting with their feet. So some people are cool with that. Great. So I think it's about, there's kind of this reshuffling going on, and I think that's good.
Yeah. I just, there was an interview just a couple of days ago as one of the big corporates in India. The chief of that corporate mentioned that if it was for me, I would get people to come in and work on a Sunday as well, because how much are you going to stare at your wife on your day off?
Yeah.
So, and it's created a huge rage, obviously. And here is when you realize there's a big divide. And obviously this corporate chief would be on a very high salary compared to somebody who's working at a very junior level. So there's a big disparity in terms of salaries. You're motivated, obviously, for different reasons. And also you're in different phases of life to...
Right. When you're almost retired, your kids are gone. When your kids are 2 and 3, you should be home a little bit more.
Yeah. And so it largely also depends on what phase of life you're in. And that has to, that defines of where would you spend a lot of hours at work or not as well, right? So your take is a hybrid model is the best model for corporates right now.
Well, it's a good one. I'm not saying it's the best one. So again, it's going to depend on what industry you're in, if it's suitable to the task, if it's suitable to the work. It's going to depend.
Right.
So don't quote me on that.
I won't quote you on that. Let me ask you $1 million question for which I will quote you for. Does money buy happiness?
Yeah.
And does it stop at a certain level of...
So we have lots of research on this. And so the answer is yes and no. And the answer has changed a little bit given research in the last 2 or 3 years. So how do I say it? Under a certain amount where you're still trying to meet your basic needs, is money going to make you happier? Absolutely.
Yes.
Okay. So you're trying to pay your bills, you're trying to pay your kids' school fees, braces, sorry. So there's a certain point at which it is exponential and then it flattens. Once it flattens, after that, what makes the difference is how you spend it.
Right.
So it's not the money in itself, because you see people who have a lot of money and they just buy the most ridiculous things. And you're like, I could have thought of 50 better ways to do that. But what we buy after that is what makes the difference. So again, more research showing that people who focus on objects, now it depends on what objects. Yeah. So again, there's lots of nuances here, but people who are just buying to buy for status, you want to impress people, look at this shiny car, look at this new whatever gadgets and whatnot. That tends to be more on the materialistic side. It tends to be a little bit more short-lived. It doesn't really lead to lasting changes. People who instead focus more on experiences, taking all your kids on a ski trip, learning a new language, investing in a university degree, giving money to charity. So it's how you use that money that tends to make the biggest difference. Now I'm going to go back to objects for a moment, because there are other studies that say, but it's the type of object that makes the difference. Let's say you're a collector. You like fine art. You like, I don't know. Art is just probably the best example I can think of because I know a lot of art collectors, and it is objects, it is consuming, but there's an enjoyment in it.
Right.
And it's not shallow in the sense of I just want to impress people, but I actually went to see the artist. I learned about the background. I learned about how this piece of art was made. In fact, I'm now taking art classes to learn to do it myself. So there's learning, there's depth to it. It's not just on the shallow side of it.
Yeah.
I'm really complicating this answer. More recently, though,
there is no easy answer, though.
No, in psychology, there's never an easy answer. It's never straight. In the past year or two, there's been other studies that have really started to question this plateau.
Yeah.
And again, when we pick it apart even more finely, what we do see is that, yes, it does increase. It's not as huge as the one before you meet your basic needs. So it kind of hits a plateau, and then it's gradual. But yeah, kind of, it does.
It does.
Again, it comes back to what we buy. So what we find is that for people who are in developed countries, define that however you want, buying time, for example, does lead to happiness.
Right.
So if I can buy time, meaning somebody's going to come in and clean my house, I'm going to get a driver, I'm going to get a cook and a nanny and a whatever. So not just so I can impress others, but so I can then go and
have some free
learn, have free time, discretionary time. Yes, then that makes a difference.
Right.
So to round all that up, it's really what you do with it.
Right. But again, what we do with our time or with our money right now, sorry, it's so largely decided by some of the finest minds that are working on the social media algorithms, right? We're bombarded with ads of fancy cars, great homes, business class flights, etc., etc. It's really, for the new generation that I see now, for them, I think collecting arts would be a thing of a past. Because everybody just wants to buy the next best thing.
Yeah.
And we can't blame them. It's just the kind of world we live in. So how would you define happiness in the future? It's a very tricky question, I understand.
So there's also starting to be more of a backlash against this. So we see rising rates of mental health issues in young people. We see rising rates of loneliness, a decline in social relationships. I was just listening to a podcast last night, and this was about the US, but it, sort of questioning, is it a global trend? During COVID, we spent a lot of time alone, and the rates of alone time are even actually worse now than they were during COVID. We haven't gone back to relationships. And there's this kind of deep yearning, if you will, for connection. So I'm seeing the flip side. You go on Instagram and you're seeing, I don't know if you've seen it, it's been everywhere, time left, breakfast.
Yeah.
There's all these platforms now to connect people. So it is on social media, but once you're connected, then it brings you to a restaurant where you actually sit and chat with people. 5 total strangers you've never met in your life, because we've lost the art of connecting. We've lost the art of talking. We've lost the art of living, actually. So I do see that some people are starting to, put down the phone and say, I can't do this anymore. Oh my gosh, I've been on my phone for how many hours today or how many hours this week? And I also challenge people to start tracking how much time they spend online, and also asking yourself, how many new people have you met this week or this month or this year?
Right. But I think people are getting more nuclear. You're right. People just want to be on their own because now they have this device in their hand.
And it's not good for us.
It's not good for us. But again, like I said, there are some brilliant minds working on these algorithms and getting you hooked onto that device.
Right.
It's really difficult, especially for the kids who are growing up in this generation where the phone's so easily available and accessible to them. It's really difficult for them to go out, network, meet people, make new friends, because they're very happy doing what they're doing on the phone, on the devices.
And this is why moves like in Australia, I think it was Australia, don't quote me on that, I'll have to go find it. But I know a few countries have been looking at legislation
Yes, I've
for
heard the
kids
news,
to
yes.
not bring the phone to school. So again, I think we are starting to see this backlash. Social media is not great for young people. And even if it's not harmful, we're missing out on the good things that come from connecting with other people. We're missing out on playing sports.
Yes.
And losing. And what does that do for our growth and development? We're missing out on volunteering, joining the Girl Guides and the Boy Scouts and, going out in the forest. So all of these developmental milestones are now being replaced by TikTok and Instagram. And that's not good for us.
Yeah, it's like, when times are great, when times are good, you feel the whole world is with you, right? Because you're on these great apps, talking to people from another part of the world. But it's only when you go through some really serious, turbulent and bad times, you realize that these people are not going to help you. And there are no friends. Your families you haven't met or spoken to for a long time. You're right. It just takes you to this very lonely spot. And suddenly you have no help.
And I'd go a step further. I think it's good when we feel lonely because it motivates us to go out and do something. I think the danger is that people are not even feeling lonely anymore. They're just used to being alone. This is just their life now. So it's that echo chamber you're hearing. Again, the algorithm is feeding you what you already believe and think. So you always think you're right. There's no diversity, or it's this political polarization. We feel the world is a very mean place. And so we react in kind. And so we end up creating that kind of mean world. So the dynamics are changing and not in a great way. That worries me. Anyway, this is supposed to be a podcast on happiness. So, but it's a concern. It's a concern.
No, we're discussing the entire, because more you look for happiness, it can also be that you are more miserable because you're always chasing happiness, right?
I think what we also need is to understand what is happiness.
Yeah.
So people will, look for, the shiny shoes or the watch or the car. And I'm not saying that doesn't lead to happiness.
Yeah.
If you want to buy me some shoes, I'll take them, right? But it's that, what does it mean to be happy?
Mm-hmm.
And in the research literature, again, I always go back to that, but this is also borne out by philosophy. So if we think about Epicurus talked about hedonia or hedonism.
Mm-hmm.
And hedonism, it's got kind of a bad rap, but actually we need that. It's, the little chocolate bar you have today. It's singing in your car to your favorite song on the radio. It's hanging out with your friends and enjoying a nice glass of wine or whatever. It's the small pleasures in life that we need. That's one form of happiness. The other form is eudaimonia. Aristotle talked about this. Mm-hmm. Aristotle was slightly more boring. So he looked at more, meaning and purpose in life and living according to our values, basically having a reason to get up in the morning because what you do is important in some way. Now, it doesn't mean you have to be the CEO of some big major company, but just raising your kids, that's meaningful. So I think, one of the difficult things or bad things about social media is it's giving us this image of happiness that isn't really real. It's not the 5-star parties, unless you live in Dubai, maybe, but right. But even that, it's presenting this image of what your life should look like. Nobody actually has that life, or certainly not for very long. So what is happiness? It's doing something that you find meaningful and moments of joy every day.
Yeah.
So chasing happiness, if you've got the wrong image, can fix you up for failure. On the other hand, chasing anything always leaves you in a state of wanting and wanting.
Yeah.
I would say maybe more the better advice is prioritize. How do we prioritize happiness? How do we prioritize, hedonic living and eudaimonic living? And how do we think about happiness as something that we live and do and become versus something we buy, consume, measure, track?
Right. That's great. Going back to loneliness, and as per some stats, I think loneliness increases the risk of early death by about 26%.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's as bad as smoking.
Yeah. And I was shocked when I read the stat about loneliness and how it can increase the death, early death. What do workplaces need to do more, since it's such an important big number?
Yeah.
What do workplaces need to do to make sure that people are more connected and just sort of work on this loneliness factor?
Yeah, I love this question because this is an aspect of well-being in the workplace that we typically ignore.
Mm-hmm.
Most workplaces will look at employee well-being as though it's something that exists solely in their heads. And well-being is actually something in the spaces between us. So relationships, and it doesn't mean we want to be constantly talking with people, working with people, because you need to get your work done. Sometimes you want to say, okay, can you just leave me alone, please? But really putting priority on when you work here, we will watch out for you. We will ask you how you are. We will say, hey, what did you do this weekend? Mm-hmm. If you're looking down or something's wrong, we will pull you aside and say, is everything okay? We will match people up. Maybe there's a buddy system and everybody in the organization is paired up with one other person. And maybe that lasts for a year. And the next year you get somebody new. Maybe when you join the organization during the onboarding period, you meet with somebody every single day just for 5 minutes to say, anything you need. Do you know where the pens are? Let me show you where the coffee room is. We know when people have greater social relationships, they are more productive and sooner in organizations. So there are benefits to doing that. When we think about who's most lonely in organizations, it's often that the younger generation. Maybe that's because they're always on their phone. I don't know. Yeah. But also older employees, because we just assume they're fine.
Yeah.
And they don't need any more attention. They know what they're doing. We can ignore them. And we tend to focus on certain groups. But even those people who seemingly are fine, again, it's not that we're lonely and we're crying in the corner, but, it's nice to be seen, right? So even thinking about how do we build those, maybe it's reverse mentoring, because I would need to learn how to use TikTok and I'd love somebody to show me, right? So it's just how do we create opportunities for people to connect in genuine, authentic ways, but that they get something out of it. So it's not contrived and awkward. It could be once a month, organization-wide, from 12 to 2 on a Friday, we all stop work and we're having lunch together. Mm-hmm. And you're paired up. Here's your lunch card. Go find this person. And that's who you're sitting with this time. And it's really about how do we get to know one another? So how do we build social capital in organizations? And that has benefits because now I know so-and-so in this department that I didn't know before. I don't even know what they do. I don't even know what building they were in. But now, next time I've got this new project, I'm like, oh, wait, I know. Hold on. I know that guy, right? Mm-hmm. Now I can call. So we find people share information more easily when there's more social capital. People are more trusting. People rely on one another for support. People are more likely to ask one another and say, how would you deal with this? What are your thoughts on this? You come from an engineering background or finance background. What is it I need to know that I'm not seeing? This is huge benefits for organizations. So loneliness is one thing, but I would say it's just being isolated, working in our little zones. We just come in, do our work, check out, the end. Our work itself could be much better if we communicated and collaborated more often.
But do you see that happening? I mean, these are your thoughts on what should happen?
Yeah. Oh gosh, no. No, we're still at, yoga and don't smoke and we're getting there. So there's a few organizations I'm working in. I'm starting to introduce the idea of how do we build social capital?
Yeah.
And a lot of people are like, loneliness, nobody's lonely here. Well, again, you're not going to see them crying in the bathrooms, but it's just how do we build this facilitation of information, transfer of information, transfer of expertise, ease of connection.
Yeah.
Again, it's how do we, there's gaps between all of the different departments and teams. How do we make those gaps a little bit stickier, a little bit muddier so that people work together across silos and not just within their silos?
Yeah.
So they're starting to, I think people are starting to get that.
Yeah. But I again go back to the point, like, if someone's lonely or someone's not getting in with the other members of the team, will they admit it? And that's again no one's going to cry and let you know that, that they're not happy or lonely.
So this is where managers come in.
Yeah.
So the other piece that organizations are also starting to get, which I'm really happy about, again, the research supports this. If you want to improve your employees' well-being, leave your employees alone, focus on your managers. So they drive 70% of employee well-being. It's huge. It's more than employees themselves influence.
Right.
So when you've got managers that are trained in the skills to nurture well-being in their teams, then that person, the onus of that person, the lonely person to say, oh, I'm kind of lonely, it's not on them, but it's on the manager to say, this guy is not talking to anybody. And actually, nobody's talking to him either. So, hey, should we go for lunch today? Yeah. Tell me about you. Tell me about yourself, right? So it's up to the manager to start pulling people in and creating and nurturing this team so that there's more interactions going on. So sometimes it is, the person who's always a little bit on the outside, and sometimes people want to be there, and that's cool, but at least check, at least ask, at least make the effort to try and pull people in.
Yeah. But that's not always easy as well, because, you're working in corporates who want profits. Well, rightly so, because it's a profit-making company. Yeah. And
but
the managers
one doesn't preclude the other.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. No, absolutely.
Right.
But again, it's a mindset, right?
Yeah.
People are running towards the profit. There are targets, there are deadlines. I don't think people or organizations have yet taken it very seriously about managing the happiness quotient or the loneliness factor, etc. Do you think if it is more regulated by authorities, and I think that sort of hammer is needed for organizations to be a little bit more serious?
Please, that would be fantastic. So let me take an example. Schools.
Mm-hmm.
So schools talk about well-being, blah, 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 right? So some of them do it and do it really well.
Mm-hmm.
Others put a big happy face on the door and the end. School authorities now, it is part of the school inspection system framework, if you will, that all schools must show. So there, either it's an initiative, either it's a service, either it's a framework, but something around how we take care of kids' well-being. That is now part of the regulation. So now all schools have to do it. So now there's no question about it. It's being done. I would love it if organizations could do the same thing, if that were regulated in some way.
Yeah.
That would just solve a whole bunch of problems. And I don't think it's that far-fetched. So if we think about health, for example, Ministry of Labor, pick any country, asbestos. There was a time everybody worked with asbestos and it was cool. And then we're like, oh, people died. That's bad. So there's a regulation for that, right? There's health and safety guidelines and they're built into law. If we think about, ISO 45003, I think is the one you're getting at. Certain countries, Australia being one of them, now mandates by law that all organizations must show that they are taking care of employee well-being. So whether that's through psychological safety, whether that's through, mental health initiatives, whatever it may be, but you have to show that you are doing this. Because if there's an outcome, one day, heaven forbid, something happens and you have not followed that regulation, you're now liable for that.
Right. So I think regulations is really important. And I think it will progress the entire wellness, employee wellness vertical. Because
now it is voluntary. We're depending on goodwill. We're depending on science and research. We're trying to convince. Right? If we just legislated it.
It just takes off in the right way.
Yeah.
And makes huge progress, right? I think. And end of the day, progress in employee well-being and happiness will result in greater profits.
It does, exactly. When everybody's tired, resentful, working at cross purposes with that department and they hate each other, this is not conducive to working well at any rate.
No, 100%.
Right? So it is in organizations' interest to be taking care of employee well-being, including their own well-being.
Right.
So managers are also really struggling. So are senior leaders. We haven't even touched on that yet. We keep focusing on employees, but I would say a lot of people are struggling to keep up with work. It's not really fit for human purpose.
Right. Okay, so if you had to give me one advice that I should take away from this conversation, one habit that I can cultivate to become a little bit more happier in life, what would that be? Just one.
I'm going to give you 2.
You can give me 2 or 3.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe 3. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'll just tell you what I do. So in previous years, again, I was more on the eudaimonic side. So, researching, publishing, trying to make a name for myself. And yeah, it was very meaningful. And I just burnt out. I'm like, I'm having no fun. I have a beautiful list of publications and I'm having no fun. So I didn't really switch. I mean, I still like doing that, but I equally prioritized joy and pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
So savoring, I talked earlier about the positive psychology interventions. Savoring is one of those.
Mm-hmm.
And savoring is really about enjoy what you do, be in the moment. So now when I go out, I want the nice wine. And when I drink it, I savor it.
Mm-hmm.
And I might end up Googling, where's this from? Who made it? What grape is it? What country? What region? What geography? So it's a little bit like the art collector thing, right? So I take an interest in the things around me that I can taste, hear, smell, touch.
Mm-hmm.
And so savoring is really about be in the moment, whether it's experience it, right? So we have different ways we can go through life. You can have that Starbucks latte, gulp it, get on with your day, not even notice, or you could just take 1 second and go, oh, I love that smell of coffee.
Yeah. Slow down.
Yeah. And it doesn't take any longer. You're drinking it anyhow. Right?
Yeah.
So savoring is one thing that I try to do consistently. I try to do it every single day. Now, some days it works, some days it doesn't, but I prioritize that. The other thing I've done, networking.
Mm-hmm.
I network on purpose frequently. So that might be through wine tasting. That might be through dinner clubs. That might be through art visits. That might be through, there's a ton of social activities in this city, in every city.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not because I'm lonely. It's because, when you fall out of habit of connecting with people, it gets harder and harder to do. But I noticed a couple of years ago, I was running out of ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just because I wasn't talking to people enough.
Right.
You can only read so much. You have to see, experience. But also, the more I connected with people, the more my own development, people provoke you.
Right.
People challenge you. People push you. People make you walk away and go, really? Is that a thing? I never thought about that.
Yeah.
And you start to see things from different people's perspectives. That adds a richness to our experience. So I very purposefully network as often as I can. And that is a strategy in positive psychology. And in fact, it's called act like an extrovert. And so 10 minutes a day, although I am kind of extroverted, but 10 minutes a day is all you need. Right. So even introverts can do this. Force yourself for 10 minutes, talk to somebody in the elevator, at the Carrefour grocery line. I don't care where you are. Say something. Right. It's not as bad as you think it is.
Are you an introvert or an extrovert?
I was much more introverted. I think it was just my context.
Yeah. Reading
and researching. You don't talk to a lot of people. Now I will always be the weird person in the elevator to go, how are you? Or at the gym. Hey, you want to be my friend? Yeah. Right. I talk to people all the time.
That's interesting. So savoring is one, experiencing the moment and connecting with more people.
Yes.
That's your advice for living a slightly happier, better life.
Yes.
Right. Wonderful. Let's do a little bit of a fun segment now. I'm going to ask you a few questions. You get 3 seconds to answer.
Okay. Please don't ask me what animal I would be.
Very simple, easy questions, right? Let's start with a book that shaped your perspective on happiness.
Oh, no, I can't answer this. No, I read research.
Any research, or is it a mix of multiple researches?
It's a 2008 article. It's very boring. By Ads Bergma called on the garden. I think it's called The Garden of Happiness. Basically, it's Epicurus philosophy.
Right.
And that sold me on hedonic happiness.
Is it available for everyone to read?
Yeah, but it's an academic article. It's like 17
right.
pages. It's very boring. It'll put you straight to sleep.
Do you think we should just put it in the link on the podcast and let's see who wants to read it?
Yeah.
Right. One habit you swear by.
To always have my gym bag packed and in the vehicle.
Oh, that's brilliant. How many times do you work out?
I try to do something every day.
Every day?
Yes.
7 days a week?
Yes. So it's either ride my bike, work out, tennis, weights, kettlebells. Last night I was skipping.
It's brilliant.
And I have my own skipping rope.
It's inspiring.
It makes me happy.
And one happiness myth that you like to debunk?
That you have to be happy all the time. I particularly hate this one because if you're happy all the time, it means you're manic and you need to be medicated, and that's not normal. That's a mental health issue, actually.
Right.
Yeah. You're allowed to be miserable, even if you're prioritizing happiness. Yeah.
And what's your recharge strategy? What is that one thing that you do that completely refuels and recharges you?
I sleep. I prioritize sleep.
Is it how many hours?
I'm in bed by 10.
Okay.
10:15 latest.
Right.
Yeah. Sleep.
And how many hours do you sleep?
Like just around 8.
8 hours?
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
I need to sleep. I'm very cranky if I don't. I'm not a nice person if I don't sleep. It's for your own safety.
I'm sure you've had your sleep because this is a great conversation.
Thank you.
Right, brilliant. A mistake that taught you the most?
Not believing people when they show you who they are the first time.
Ah.
So I'm much better at that. Now that I see it, I'm like, okay, thank you. I will take that information as cash.
Okay.
Yeah.
And if you could teach one happiness practice to the world, what would that be?
Stop listening to experts like me, like anybody, and really just
find
what works for you. Think back to when you've been happiest. Just do more of that.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Louise. This was a great and extremely valuable conversation. I've learned a lot.
Good.
And I'm going to go back to savoring part.
Good.
To be in the moment more. It's not that I haven't tried before. It's not easy. As you said, it's a habit that you need to develop over time. And I'm going to take this very seriously. And next time when we have a chat, I'm going to tell you the progress that I've made.
Fantastic.
Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much.
It's lovely to have you.
Thank you.